So at Green Growth CPAs, we work with very small cannabis companies and very large cannabis companies, the ones that are publicly traded. And one thing we see throughout all the high-performing cannabis businesses is that they all have an employee handbook and robust job description. Now, aside from all the HR benefits from these documents, there are actually some tax benefits that you probably don't know about, specifically for cost of goods sold. Now, in this video, we're going to explore those benefits as well as a compliance benefit that you really need to look out for. Now, if you need help with writing out an employee handbook or writing out those job descriptions, then please reach out to Green Growth CPAs via our website at greengrowthcpas.com or give us a call at 800-674-9050. Let's hop right into the presentation. Today's topic is tax and operational benefits of an employee handbook and job description for cannabis businesses. And this presentation is brought to you by Green Growth CPAs. Now, an employee handbook, like any standard operating procedure, is useful for a variety of reasons. It can help you onboard new employees and train them on your company culture. It can create a common bond for cannabis dispensaries that have multiple locations. And in a worst case scenario, it covers you in legal matters in the event that you need to fire somebody and it just doesn't go as planned. Now, what few cannabis business operators know and understand is that there's actually some tax advantages to having a well thought out employee handbook as well as job descriptions. So in this video, we're going to review some of the benefits of having a robust employee handbook and detailed job descriptions. But before we do, I need to let you know that the information contained in this presentation is meant for guidance purposes only and not as professional legal or tax advice. And further, it does not give any personalized legal, tax, investment, or any business advice in general. So let's review what we're going to cover today. So first, I'm going to quickly review what an employee handbook and job description are. You're probably familiar with it, but I want to make a quick distinction on what the differences are between these two documents. And then I'm going to review three main benefits of an employee handbook and job description, which are a reasonable methodology for cost of goods sold and the employee time specifically on that, the gross negligence quote-unquote protection, as well as compliance with the employee and employer relationship. So first, what is an employee handbook and a job description? So with an employee handbook, this is general and detailed information that goes to all employees of your organization. Now, an employee handbook is a document or a collection of documents that contains a company's operating procedures, essentially. And it usually is delivered to a worker upon their first day of employment. And employers utilize the employee handbook to establish important policies that are expected in the workplace and to protect the rights of employers and employees, right? Establishing that employee-employer relationship. Now, the document discloses legal information such as the company's equal employment opportunity policy, including workplace harassment policies, as well as expectations for safety in the workplace. Now, these are like kind of the do's and don'ts of the workplace, and it tells you how the general business at a high level operates in most of the company-wide policies and procedures. Now, a job description is specific information for a specific role in an organization, right? It's much more granular and much more specific to the actual job that the person is going to be performing. Now, a job description is a document, and it's usually a shorter one than the employee handbook, and it's intended to provide applicants with an outline of the main duties and the responsibilities of the role for which they're applying, or if it's for a current employee, it's for the role that they actually hold. Now, you also see on these job descriptions compensation, other expectations, qualifications, things like that, but we're really going to focus on the responsibilities and the duties of the role. Now, these job descriptions really provide the employee with what the expectations are and what's required of them in the role, to support the recruitment team during the selection process, and specifically to help formulate questions for the interview process. You're going to ask the bud tender something different than you are your warehouse inventory manager. This also helps to set goals and targets for employees once they join the company, hitting specific milestones. They maybe get payment increases or they get certain things and benefits. This also helps in aiding in the evaluation of an employee's job performance. You said they were going to do these 9 things. Did they actually do those 9 things and fulfill on their job? And to help formulate training and development plans for employees. In most cases, you don't want employees to be stagnant in just that one role. And they don't either. They want to grow within a company that has that, upward mobility. So this helps you formulate that training and development plan when you start putting a few different job descriptions together and you see how they stack up and okay, you start at A, then you got to get to B and a C. Now here's the bridge between A and B, and here's the bridge between B and C. So now that you understand what an employee handbook is and what a job description is and the difference between the two, let's talk about some benefits of these two documents within the company. So the first benefit I want to discuss is having a reasonable methodology for cost of goods sold, or COGS, specifically the time portion or the employee's time portion of that. Now, as you know, the 280E tax code makes it almost impossible for cannabis business operators to claim certain expenses that other ordinary businesses would otherwise be able to deduct from their tax return. Now, because cannabis still remains a Schedule I controlled substance, the only thing that cannabis operators are able to deduct from their revenue is cost of goods sold. Now, COGS refers to all costs involved in creating a product. For example, things like packaging, labeling, and the raw materials. Not with selling a product. That's an SG&A expense, this marketing and selling expenses. You can't take those as a cannabis business operator. Now, you may not know this, but the IRS doesn't define the way to allocate COGS. As a result, cannabis operators must come up with their own system. Now, you have very sophisticated companies and operators that get a lot of technology, filing systems. They track and implement job codes for each task. They track the hours down to the minute. They even have check-in and check-out functions for each rooms that employees are in and designate that room as a specific task or function. And that's a lot of work, it's a lot of investment, it's a lot of money. But for startup cannabis companies, the employee handbook and job description serves as a sufficient tool for developing, again, a reasonable methodology for allocating employee time to COGS. So how do you do that? In the employee handbook or the job description, you're going to list out all the different expectations for each employee's roles and what they're going to be doing. Now, one of those requirements will delineate how an employee will be spending their time. So for instance, you may say that a specific employee is going to spend 15% of their time on packaging bulk products into smaller unit pack sizes, 25% of their time greeting customers and fulfilling orders, 10% of their time spent cleaning up the work area, 35% of their time tracking inventory age and levels, and 15% of their time spent reordering products and doing QA testing. So that's kind of how you would break down someone's 100% of their time. Now, some of these tasks could be allocated to COGS. Now, for example, if it's 30% of their time that can go to COGS, what you're going to do is take their full wage for that period, multiply it by 30%, and that's how you can reasonably allocate their time into cost of goods sold. Now, if you ever experience an audit, which is likely in cannabis, we've been talking about this for quite some time, then you will now have these documents to back up your methodology, and we call these audit additives. Essentially, what you're going to do is triangulate your employee handbook, the job descriptions, with the COGS allocations with respect to the payroll expenses to justify your tax deductions. Now, the second benefit of the employee handbook and job description is gross negligence, quote-unquote, protection. Now, I don't want to say this is a bulletproof protection. We are not a law firm. We don't give legal advice, but this is something to help document that you've done something to prevent any issues within the company around specific SOPs. Now, cannabis businesses are cash heavy. That's obvious. We all know that. So it's imperative that you set and follow a large amount of SOPs around the movement of money and what you're reporting to your accounting department and what you're reporting to the government. So here's really why you need those SOPs. As we witnessed in the Alterman case, you can Google that, Alterman, Alterman case, a cannabis business operator was given an accuracy-related penalty because they showed gross negligence in not keeping accurate records of cash movement and inventory within the company. Now, in Alterman versus the commissioner, again, a cannabis operator attempted to argue for a higher cost of goods allocation, but didn't have a system in place to justify those claims. So instead, the court sided with the IRS's narrow description of COGS, which are purchase costs plus production costs, and leaves out beginning and ending inventory. So this determination cost the company a large sum of money simply because they were negligent in developing a system of cost allocations. Now, employee time could be one of those. We discussed that in the previous slide. So making sure you have these can help you avoid gross negligence if you're going to take a higher cost of goods allocation. Well, how did you get to that number? And these same gross negligence problems can arise with investors. It's not just with the government. And in most operating agreements or most investment agreements, if you're going to take on any investments from investors, they are going to detail how accounting and reporting must happen within a company, right? The investor wants to know what's going on, how's the company performing, at least on a quarterly basis in most examples. Now, failing to follow the agreed upon guidelines of the accounting and the reporting could end up with you being kicked out of your own company. So do you really want to be kicked out for something that you can easily prevent if you have some type of SOP or procedure around this? And this is not unheard of. You may be thinking, oh my goodness, that's so egregious. Why would they kick a company out for bad accounting? Well, think about it in an investor standpoint. If I'm giving you $3 or $5 million, I want to know how you're spending it, and I need to know that you're actually doing what you say you're doing. Now, this is where the employee handbook plays a role in kind of tying up this gross negligence stuff. In the handbook, you're going to lay out the procedures that an employee or a manager will follow for various tasks that the IRS or investors will be looking at. So things like that include handling cash. How do you count tills in and out to help protect against cash being diverted or stolen from the business? The next one, a really big thing that most people don't pay attention to until it's too late, filing Form 8300. Typically, the IRS uses this to kick off audits because they know you operate in a lot of cash. And when they see $750,000 in revenue on your tax return and only see 1 or 2 Form 8300 filings, and they know you operate in a lot of cash, they say, all right, well, there's got to be some type of gross negligence compliance issues with your business. So let's just send a little notice out and say, hey, we want to see all your Form 8300s, open up your books, we want to see how much cash transactions you have. Now, if your employees are not following your SOP and filing these Form 8300s on a timely basis, it can be huge penalties and even bring you into money laundering territory. Another one here, cash log maintenance. Now we talked about audits and all these different things that have to do with cash logs. It's very rudimentary when you look at some of these cash logs. It's just a notebook with date, amount, person, and what they're doing with the money. Are they putting it in or taking it out? Now, if you aren't making accurate entries into that cash log, just the very basics, then you'll likely have some holes in your accounting, which the IRS will not be happy about, and neither will your investors, and neither will you as an operator if you don't know how much money you actually have on hand and if people are stealing from you. And lastly, another SOP is inventory management and counting. Now again, as we saw in the Alterman case, this is incredibly critical to have SOPs on how we do inventory management because we all have inventory and we need to make sure it's being tracked properly, counted on the right date because you can't go back in time and track inventory and count it. And you need to have all this stuff so that you have clean books for your tax preparer. Now, of course, accidents happen and some of these things are going to come up and you may not file all your Form 8300s because no organization is perfect. So if you get audited, you can use the employee handbook and any relevant checks and balances that you've installed into your company, right? Maybe you're doing some testing. Hey, employees, you need to fill out, write down maybe the 5 or 6 steps to a Form 8300 before you actually get into your role and touch any cash. Now, this shows that you've established policies and procedures and that employees actually knew what those policies and procedures were. Maybe they didn't follow them, but this is the best that you can do as an employer, or at least one of the things that you can do to prove that you're not being grossly negligent. In addition, make sure you're conducting your regular internal audits. Now, this is where that really strong, robust checks and balances comes in. So you understand that, hey, I'm going to do a little spot check on the cash log, or I'm going to jump in and see, are there any invoices over $10,000 and where is the relevant Form 8300 at? Now, this helps you understand that, yes, the cash handling and accounting procedures are actually being followed within my company. And the last benefit I want to talk about here is a compliance benefit, not necessarily around taxes, but it's about that employee and employer relationship and making sure things run as smooth as possible. Now, as you know, hiring and firing is just part of the job when you operate and own a business. Now, having an employee handbook and job descriptions can make this part a bit more cut and dry and a repeatable process that you can continually improve on, right? It sets clear expectations and performance standards for candidates and for employees. If you're hiring for somebody and you don't have a detailed job description, it's very general. It's like, hey, you're just going to be working at this company for this many hours. Then they get in there, they start working, and you're like, well, this employee doesn't know how to do this, or they're not doing this or that. Well, maybe they didn't know because the job description didn't tell them that's what they would be responsible for. You hired the wrong person, and now you have to rehire. Well, first you have to fire that person and deal with any fallout from that, and then you have to find somebody else and spend all that time hiring again. So job descriptions are critical in that repeatable hiring process. Now, an employee handbook is more than just a reference manual for managers. It explains those expectations for everyone and mentions the consequences of violating these rules. Now, by explaining workplace ethics and expected behavior with colleagues and the management, an employee handbook minimizes workplace disputes. Now, here's the important nuance of this entire employee-employer relationship in the handbook. And we hear this time and time again with our clients. Yes, we do the accounting, but we're a trusted advisor, and they ask us for help on other aspects or just, what are your considerations for this? Now, the important nuance is this. There are plenty of federal and state and even city-specific regulations around hiring and firing practices and avoiding discrimination or any other issues. Now, an employee handbook is a useful tool to consolidate all those regulations in one place and lay them out in clear terms to protect your business. Now, you see this all the time. You need to have set guidelines for the steps to take and if an employee is underperforming, right? We fire people all the time in cannabis businesses, not us specifically, but we as an entire industry, you're always hiring and firing. Now, you're going to have those underperforming employees. Now, what happens when that employee is underperforming? Are they placed on leave? Do they get a probationary period? Do they get put on a performance management plan? And if so, what does that look like? Those are really important things to discuss. You may have not gotten to that point because maybe it's a family affair right now. It's you and your dad and your cousins and your mother, and you're all working together. And it's like, look, it's family. We just got to do this and tough it out. But what happens when you start to grow and expand and you hire outside of the family and now you need to deal with, Mikey or Michelle that is not family, and you need to have some kind of procedures for that. Now, not only that it helps develop these procedures for these really, icky situations, it can also save your HR team, if you have one, or your HR designated person. It can save them time from answering questions and help relieve the burden of onboarding employees with giving them information like, okay, this is how we do work schedules. You have to submit your time off at least 4 weeks in advance. Or here's some workplace safety and security guidelines. Here are your employee benefits and how you qualify for them. Here's our leave policies and for PTO. And here's how you file a complaint. Make sure that your handbook is thorough and easy to use. Content plus consumability. And once you have that in good shape and it's working, it can be used to guide your business for many, many years. And one thing you may want to consider is doing an annual review of the handbook and the job descriptions, especially the job descriptions of positions that are either very high paying or that have incredibly high turnover. Maybe your job description is the issue that you're having a hard time getting the right person because you're attracting the wrong talent. As you look at hiring for any kind of business, when you put a thing out on Monster, a job recommendation or request, you're going to get hundreds and hundreds of resumes in most cases. Now, you want to make sure that you're attracting the right hundreds and hundreds of resumes and not someone with irrelevant experience or that doesn't have the qualifications for the job. So those are really, really important things to revisit at least annually. Now, hopefully this presentation has brought you some value and helped you understand that employee handbooks and job descriptions can have some tax benefits, major tax benefits, as well as some compliance benefits and optimizations for your cannabis business. Now, if you need help with developing an employee handbook or job descriptions, reach out to Green Growth CPAs by visiting our website at greengrowthcpas.com or give us a call at 800-674-9050. As I was saying earlier in the presentation, we have become a trusted advisor for many of our clients. Again, not just in the accounting side of things, but how do other departments work together to create synergies in your accounting, right? Accounting doesn't just sit into a back room and calculate and crunch numbers. They have to work with the entire organization from supply chain, HR, the sales team, the senior team, to creating a cohesive system of people that work together to create the best methodologies for doing the best accounting, again, specifically on that CoGS allocation. So again, if you need help with developing an employee handbook or job descriptions, reach out to Green Growth CPAs by visiting our website at greengrowthcpas.com or give us a call at 800-674-9050. Have a great day and we'll talk to you soon.